If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to Downfall Network for more cool content.
What's up, everyone? Thralls of Metal here, doing a retro review on Shredlord.
Rin, you met me.
Necrotic Nick.
So today's retro review is going to be about the band Carnivore, formed in 1983 with, of course, legendary bassist Peter Steele of Typo Negative.
Pretty much, Pete Steele formed this band with Louis Vito on drums, and Pete had a previous band before that called Fallout, which broke up, and this was the band that came after it. Important to note that this band Fallout also featured Josh Silver, who also became a member of Typo Negative, which, we'll get to that part later. They pretty much rounded out the lineup with Keith Alexander on guitars, and released their self-titled debut in 1985 on Roadrunner Records. And man, is this album a lot of fun to listen to.
Carnivore is a riot.
They eat meat, and they want to meet you, and me AT. This is pretty much this perfect odd blend of thrash metal, classic heavy metal, and like doom metal. Surprisingly, it's very odd, especially when you get to these transitions. They go from like a Judas Priest or Iron Maiden gallop to flat out like Black Sabbath, or rather stuff that would sound a hell of a lot like Typo Negative when we get around to that point.
The cover of the first Carnivore album, Thingina?
Yeah, that kind of reminded me of the whole little let's do the
Female unit with teeth?
Yeah, pretty rough. Now, granted, that wasn't like the original cover, but that was the first version I think anyone saw on CD, and yeah, it's
slightly disturbing.
It leaves a lot to the imagination.
You're stranded with your team in the Arctic Circle, and a guy has a heart attack. You get the paddles out, and you push, and then teeth rip your arms off. Thingina.
And
Kurt
that's
Russell.
why I have trust issues.
So the first track is called Predator. It predates the movie Predator by 2 years. However, they both start out with chopper sounds, oddly enough.
And gunfire. And a large man with muscles. I think all this is tying together really well.
It is.
I'm noticing a theme, a pattern, if
is.
you will.
There is a very thrashy beginning to the song Predator with a nice groovy middle section. Towards the bridge, it sounds like Bobby Boris Pickett came in with the Monster Mash bubbling cauldron of chains and whatnots.
And we get a hog call, which was disturbing. And
That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear right out of the gate. The only thing they're serious about is writing some catchy tunes and having a ridiculous, over-the-top time with it. Title track might be the most golden thing out there.
The title track is, it's Peter Steele expressing his love for putting his mouth on the female nether region, but he does it in a classy way. He's a classy girl.
I don't think that's what the song's about. I think it's about beef, chicken, pork chops.
Tartar.
Oh, he wants to give her actual meat. Like, is that some kind of Russian crooning thing? Like when you're trying to date a young lady and you're trying to build some rapport with her family, you buy the family some chicken.
You take her out to dinner.
It's odd though, the line "I love to eat pussy" might be a little misleading.
And that's what really threw it over the edge for me. And I knew that this song was about cunnilingus.
I'm a meat eater. I'd like to meet you.
This whole song is like Pete Steele's Tinder profile. And man, ladies, you missed out.
Yeah, because he could probably fuck somebody half a room away.
There's a lovely female moaning solo in the middle. I don't know if it's organic or if they were pretending. I'd like to think there's no pretending in this and that they're really wearing
So that way when he
fur.
closes his eyes, he feels better about the situation.
Yes.
She may have been a little off-key, but we appreciated the effort.
I think we should take the lyrics seriously. I don't think they were in jest or tongue-in-cheek or tongue-in...
Tongue in Carnivore?
Yes, tongue-in Carnivore. Licking the bones clean. There's no bones in a vagina.
Now this album is loaded with all sorts of just weird changes in styles. Like 1 second you're rocking out to something that is distinctly more like Black Flag, and then the next minute you're listening to like St. Vitus or Black Sabbath. God is Dead has one of the most weird changeovers. The opening bit kind of actually sounds like a punk version of Thin Lizzy. like these nice little tags to the end of the main riff there. And then you think you're building up to this really nasty, heavy chorus. It's a big chuggy gallop. And then all of a sudden,
you're doing the limbo.
Yeah, on a beach while Pete yells at you about God being dead. That's the only thing that remains intense on this chorus. It is this smooth little thing, and then just Pete screaming at you like, God's dead!
Copacabana in hell.
Like a drunk uncle at a karaoke machine just screaming. Like, you're not even screaming the right song.
You're adopted!
Did you know what you even requested, sir? Like, sir, we needed to cut you off like hours ago.
The song is Kokomo. God is dead! Carry on. You're very passionate, and I respect your opinion.
Another standout track for me, which may be my favorite one on the entire album, Male Supremacy. What's cool about Male Supremacy is it starts off with a very retro Judas Priest kind of vibe to it, and then it goes all sorts of different fucking epic, awesome directions that totally kind of weave in and out of each other like someone in a rush through 5 o'clock traffic. It kind of But this is the one spot on the album where old Petrus, old Petey Pete, Pete Sinatra starts crooning and swooning a little bit. We slow it down. We get some of that sexy little Barry White in the voice, and he starts making the panties melt, man.
Joe's melted like twice.
I don't think they're melting. I think they're ripped off forcefully with teeth. Carnivore. He's a meat eater. He'd like to meet you. The song, I believe, is about conquering things on horseback. Which I think at this point in 1985 in Brooklyn, New York, he had a lot of experience in, because I don't think cars were in Brooklyn until about 1989. So he predates the car by quite a bit.
I'll check the Wikipedia on that. I'm pretty sure you're right, though.
I don't think the internet needs to be involved. The middle section is the beginning of Typo Negative. I picture Peter...
Sweet, sweet Peter.
laying on a bear, tiger, leopard, cheetah skin rug in front of a fire in a small cabin he built by hand, of course.
Patchouli candle lit.
Gently swooning a vixen that he recently kidnapped. Sauntered to his cabin that he built by hand.
She found her way into the trunk. That's her fault.
It's a lonely cabin in the middle of Brooklyn. Naughty Times on Animal Skins is what we're talking about. Chimes, gang vocal chorus, Male Supremacy!
Another solid bang on here, Armageddon, which I gotta say, I love the effort put into the choruses, which is generally a lot of hardcore shouting, but this one was particularly fun because it was a call and response one, and it just felt really, I don't know, punk. It felt punk as hell. But I really liked like pretty much all the Sabbathy stuff in here, and of course when it gets right back to it, Pete announces it in his wonderful fashion, just simply kill each other. And I imagine when the pit started spinning, there was just a whirlwind of bones, teeth, and blood, as it should be.
Thermonuclear Warrior is a track on this album which is the State of the World address for the president of Mad Max Land. I don't know exactly who he's addressing that is left in Mad Max Land, but it doesn't sound good, and I don't think the prospects for prosperity are too good.
They're astronomically low at this point.
It's bleak. It's bleak. A lot of burned out husks of things. What is it? Piled of mutoids? Something?
It's definitely a lot of like tumor-riddled, maybe tentacled, I don't know, multi-headed...
Tumors.
Yeah, bad things.
He's got to be wearing a nice chain, fur, shoulder pad ensemble that is striking.
And he has my vote, and that's important.
Yeah.
I would vote for him as president of Mad Max Land.
Yes. I gotta say, I really liked the production and how raw and gritty it is. Now, Pete's bass tone is legendary. Not as present on this, but I think the recording is very muffled. His bass is very forward in the mix, but it doesn't quite have that typo tone that most of us really love.
It hasn't hit puberty yet.
Not yet. It's still growing.
It's true, but it's firm.
It is.
It grows, but not very much yet.
But it's kind of an oddity because, like, punk albums really weren't produced this way in terms of the overall sound because it's notably heavier and it has all those like 80s metal riffs. But also metal albums didn't sound this way because of so many punk elements. So this is really like an interesting crossover one in the fact that it really has a lot of like 80s metal vibes to it. And overall, this is a fun listen. This is ridiculous. Like, in terms of the humor on here, it's dark, it's weird, sometimes uncomfortable, but, I mean, that's Pete. That's kind of how we rolled.
Yeah.
It's our introduction to Pete.
Yep.
Unapologetically. Coming back to listen to this record after so many years, when I listened to this record first as a teenager, I did not appreciate, like, hardcore and punk music as much as I do today, so it was something that I just kind of casually glanced over and didn't really give much thought to. But now as I'm listening to it with a different set of ears, it was really fucking awesome. The humor of Peter Steele and the outlandish shit that flies out of his mouth all the time cannot be matched. It can't be matched. He was one of a kind. And to me, now that I listen to it with a fresh set of ears, it's really cool to kind of hear basically what ends up being the early inceptions of Typo Negative. You know, they just dial back a few things and dive into some of the more experimental stuff from Carnivore, and boom, you're in Typo land. So yeah, this was really good, and I think this album holds up pretty well even today.
Oh, hell yeah.
It's a good listen. So overall, I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5. Solid album, solid production, good couple things here and there, but honestly, for 1985, I thought it was mixed and produced really well.
For an album recorded in 1985, where most metal things were recorded like butt in an echoey butthole in a cave filled with butt, the production on this is pretty dry and straightforward. Not too dry, but it sounds like it was recorded in a CBGB's filled with warriors flinging Bud Light bottles at posers.
That's what you did.
That's what you did. That's how it was done.
Because remember, all posers must die.
All posers must die. Kill them all, right? Kill each other. Armageddon. 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 This was the beginning of Petrus Steele, and it was our introduction to his dark humor, even though he might have been serious on some of these songs.
I think it's 50-50.
But it was very influential in the New York hardcore, in your face.
Hey.
I will give it 3.5 out of 5. I like it. I like it a lot.
I think it likes you a little bit,
I
too.
would like it to touch me.
Overall, for me, this is a 4-star album. I have pretty much loved it since I heard the title track, and didn't take me long to realize what he was talking about. Like, okay, I gotta hear the rest of the album, and did not disappoint. This is a really interesting album, especially in like the history of crossover, because it really does have those like new wave of British heavy metal moments, and even like some stuff that sounds like Venom on there too. It's a fantastic listen. Hell of a intro to Pete Steele. Not so humble intro. He came out really swinging and telling you all about his hobbies and the stories that he came up with, which were very interesting and should be made into TV movies at least. Hallmark Channel, probably not, but HBO definitely. So yeah, killer album. Strongly recommend it. And we're going to move on in history here. So in between this time, between albums, Louis Vito actually joined up with Agnostic Front and drummed on their album Cause for Alarm. And I think that inspired a little bit more aggressive sound, because when Carnivore came back in 1987 with their album Retaliation, this thing was even more aggressive. This was probably the most aggressive thing I've ever heard Pete Steele do. Now also during this time, Keith Alexander on guitars had left, and replacing him was Mark Piovanetti. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. This guy definitely had some crossover pedigree with him. He actually later joined a band called the Crumbsuckers, and Retaliation was born, and this is a monster.
Yeah, this album is surprisingly amazing. Not surprisingly, but when you hear the first track of this album, I don't think you know what to expect. So
I expect
Jack Daniels and Pizza is the opening track, and all it really is Peter Steele or somebody
I think it's
puking their fucking guts out.
That was a big puke. That was a pea-sized puke.
Yeah, and it went on for a long time.
Yes.
And in my notes I wrote, WTF, there was some hair on that one. He wasn't just. It wasn't just all liquid.
It was
that
not
I can
liquid.
assure you.
No, there were chunks like
It was very chunky.
Phlegm,
Everything
snot,
like the kitchen sink.
his tears.
it's not like someone dropping grapes into a toilet at the end, man.
Not good.
Like Dinty more beef stew.
But once that poison was out of his system,
Ooh.
the rest of this album goes pretty full on fucking high energy. There's times in the album where it kind of slows down a bit, but for the most part, it's just a head rush. It's a freight train through the whole way, man. High energy. I was very impressed with how high energy and how fast and everything was moving throughout the entire album.
Notably more aggressive in pretty much every facet. Like the lyrics, they kind of went from like the dark humorous stuff on the first album to, oh my god, I think he's serious about how much he hates everything. Angry Neurotic Catholics is pretty much a diatribe, I think, about his upbringing. And I don't think he was a fan of being Catholic.
Just a hint.
Just a hint. I mean, it's pretty much him yelling about it. And it's weird because on this album, the vocal cadences sometimes aren't really vocal cadences. It's like a stream of consciousness shrieking into a microphone about how much you hate things. It's not necessarily like rhythmic or anything. It's just violent.
It's not a sin. Shut up.
Peter is mad. He's very mad, and I'm mad at the people that made him mad because I care about him so much.
Yeah, f- those guys.
It could be Jesus. It could be Jesus that he had to eat the bread and drink the wine because he's very upset about being a Catholic in this song. The chorus is great.
Not as great as the chorus of the next song, though.
No.
No. Nothing tops the chorus of the next song.
When hardcore bands put together a chorus, and generally we're talking about them yelling the song title, you have to make sure that song title stands out.
So when you cleverly type it s.m.d. for the song title, so when a mom or somebody looks on the back of the album, oh, s.m.d., whatever, no big deal. But then when the chorus is suck my dick 50 times or so, has there ever been a better chorus written in my life? In our lifetimes? Has there?
It's
simplistically beautiful.
Elegant in its simplicity.
It's a touch of class.
It is, and there's even a false start to
Love
the
the
song.
false start.
He starts going to town 30, 40 seconds, and then, nope, wasn't quite ready.
Whoa, start it again.
I think the song is a anti-jock song. He's mad at people looking at him for having long hair.
And playing that damn rock and roll.
That's what I got out of it. Start sucking into the breakdown. D-beat goodness.
That was clever.
And I gotta say, on this album, this is where you hear that oh so familiar bass tone. Like, it really comes out. Like, there's the typo tone. And especially when you get down to like slower parts you hear on like Ground Zero Brooklyn, which might be my favorite track on here.
Ooh,
The opening
is great.
So doomy. Like, this is
Very
all the Black
techno.
Sabbath love just hurled at this song. But then it breaks into like a real true like thrash metal gallop. Like, it almost kind of sounds like Four Horsemen off of Kill 'Em All. And then into blast beats. But they're like crossover blasts. So like think like D.R.I. or Cryptic Slaughter. And this song just goes off the rails, especially when you get down to a wonderful spoken word. Just isolating everything.
Very
and
angsty. He's an angsty young man.
He's mad.
He's filled with
very-
the piss and vinegar, this
Very
one.
angry. Somebody either hugged him not enough or way too much.
There's a nice medium there, and they missed it. And this one, kind of like the first album, was like a little bit of like a storytelling thing in there. Like, you also hear that in Jesus Hitler, which, if you don't think that name's offensive, the other name they call him is Adolf Christ. So
Pick your poison.
This one is pretty much like the screenplay for some Roger Corman movie that never got made.
The song's awesome.
It's
fucked, by the
ridiculous.
way.
Dripping with black humor.
Yes.
Just
And Black Sabbath worship.
Yes.
a lot of black Sabbath.
It is absolutely ridiculous, and man, the ending is particularly Sabbathy, especially that Tony Iommi-ish solo, which
It was
I gotta
good.
say, yeah,
It was good. It was very good.
guitarist does a great job
Yeah,
on
man.
this.
The lyrics. Have I returned to save the Jews or destroy them? Is
I
this
mean-
the second coming of the Fourth Reich? Swastifix? I don't
He went all out.
even know what that would
No
look
stone
like.
was left unturned.
No fucks were
But
given.
he's not mean.
No. None of this was to be taken seriously. I would say
silly.
It's silly, but it's also
Dark.
not sarcastic, but cynical.
It's dark, cynical humor, and that's what Peter's always been about.
And nihilistic as hell, because there's nothing that he loved on this album. Everything is about contempt and hatred on this.
Yeah, there's no fireside maiden nibbling.
There's no I want to meet you here.
No.
The meat is gone.
This is pretty much go away.
The meat is all gone.
I tasted you and I don't like you anymore. Get away. You stink.
Another favorite track of mine would be Technophobia. It's very Slayer-ish. It's like Raining Hard Drives or something like that. But then it gives way to this big, sexy, doomy part. My staff was at full mass.
There was a lot of groaning when this song was going on.
This song is awesome.
Funeral march.
Yeah, funeral march was just too good to deny, man.
And he's brought it in other songs too, but yeah, like all right, well, we're not angry, we're just kind of sullen and depressed, but don't worry, we're gonna get angry again.
Yeah, he's angry the whole time. But Ryan, how about that Jimi Hendrix cover?
So, if Jimi Hendrix never took acid, grew up in Brooklyn as a Catholic during the apocalypse, this is what manic depression would sound like. Much like Hey Pete off of Origin of the Feces. It's barely recognizable as the Hendrix song, but it's Peter Steele just tearing it to bits.
I'd say it's more of an evisceration than a cover. And I think Pete was more depressed than Jimmy ever was.
That's a bold statement.
I'm just going to go ahead and say it because...
Do you think Pete took acid? He'd probably more zen if he did. Maybe later with the feathers and fur and latex and stuff.
I mean, honestly, if you listen to the vocal delivery on Inner Conflict, that might be the most disturbing
Jesus Christ.
vocals I've ever heard Pete do.
But he also gives you the secret to life in sex and violence.
He does give you that.
He gives away the secret of life. I made sure I wrote it down so that way I wouldn't forget, because it was such a prolific experience for me. It was, if you can't eat it or fuck it, then kill it. Ah!
The was important.
I don't like to see him mad or sad.
He is frightening when he's mad.
Peter, what is wrong? Come home and talk to us.
He's punching the bass. He's upset. I would hug him, but I'd only come up to his mid-knee if I hugged him, and I don't think that is comforting.
I gotta say, probably the most calm moment on this entire album is the instrumental 5 Billion Dead, which is pretty much like their Orion.
Yeah.
Arpeggios.
It gave Pete a chance to show off a little bit, some of his chops and stuff, and that was cool to hear, because it was a total contrast to the rest of the album.
Yeah, I mean, you hear a little bit of the goth rock come out, and once again, the fact that it's slowed down and you hear his bass tone and the stuff he's playing is like, that sounds like it could be something a little bit in the future.
Wasn't as balls to the wall as everything else. It's like, these guys can pick instead of punch.
So this is like the intermission in between, like, viewing Cannibal Holocaust.
But in all seriousness, I give this album personally a 4 out of 5. Once again, upon listening to this with a different set of ears, I absolutely adored this album. I think there's a lot of great epic moments on here, and the dark humor, the dark cynicism, and once again, the fucking wild, never know what you're going to get mouth of Peter Steele have won me over, and this is an album that I'll definitely be listening to again in the future.
I believe this album is an influential album of bands such as Crowbar, that could have been one of the earlier formations of sludge, even though 90% of it's fast, which is odd. But I would also probably give this album 4 out of 5, because the production is pretty damn good for 1987, out of Brooklyn. I think that's what was recorded, I'm assuming. Somewhere under a bridge. But, yes. Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Have some.
I'm gonna go ahead and give this 4.5. This is one of my favorite crossover albums, not just because, the riffs are absolutely incredible and the music is pretty much packed with all things metal and punk and hardcore. My God, Peter is terrifying on this album. This is one disturbed individual, and luckily he would calm down later and get possibly more sexual. But
I think he was mad because he wanted all the goth girls, and this was badass, but it wasn't getting all the goth girls. So then he went to Josh, and he was
just
like,
biker chicks, and they smell.
Look, the leather's not doing it for me anymore. I need some fishnets, I need some white skin, I need some jet black hair, and
I need some
it
s.m.d.
yesterday."
Electrical tape on the nippies.
And so he said, I need to be a gothic crooner. And Typo Negative was born.
And then a vampire bit him. And he lived forever.
They say if you still listen closely at night in New York City, you can hear that bat nibbling on thin crust, New York style pizza.
So yeah, over the course of 2 albums, Carnivore has a pretty solid legacy, and I think one of the finest examples of crossover thrash metal. Now, unfortunately, same year this album was released, they broke up. And Pete had a little side project. It was called Sub-Zero at the time, and then they found out someone else had that name. So, Typo Negative was born. Pretty much rekindled with Josh Silver, and everyone else kind of went their own separate ways. Now, technically, the first Typo Negative album, Slow, Deep, and Hard, has a lot of like leftover Carnivore on it. Even Pete Steele said so. So you kind of got a third album, kind of. But he did reunite with them. You know, back in the mid-90s, they played some shows. And pretty much they were playing shows all throughout. They even recruited Joey Z of Life of Agony, another fine New
Joey
Yorker.
Z, huh?
Joey Z.
Joey Z, huh? He's a good
Paisa.
fella. He's a good guy. He's a good fella,
Paisa.
you know?
Played a bunch of shows, and unfortunately, in 2010, we lost Peter, and that was a giant bummer because I've been a Typo fan since I was like 14. So they pretty much ended that run of Carnivore. But in recent years, Marco Piovanetti, I hope I'm not butchering your name.
You are butchering his name.
Probably
It's okay,
am.
though. Yeah.
And-
Nickelodeon.
Louis Vito actually reformed it as Carnivore AD, and they have a new frontman, Baron Misuraka, which that's the only thing I know about him is his name. They played at Maryland Death Fest last year, and unfortunately I missed them, probably because there was something else I wanted to see on a different stage. Yeah, I know, but it wouldn't have been the same.
It wasn't Peter.
Now, granted, he is long-haired and has muscles, so that's kind of Peter, but it's
Maybe
definitely
it is.
not. It's like the ghost of Peter. They cloned him in a lab and tried to make a itty-bitty Peter.
They're putting chemicals in the water. They're turning all the frickin' frogs gay. If you like what you saw here, please give this video a like and hit the subscribe button with the little bell dingy in the bottom. That way you get notified to all the brand new Thralls of Metal content because we put crazy stuff like this out all the time. So, on behalf of my metal cohorts here, we are the Thralls of Metal, and we will catch you next time.